You owe your sister. Donate your bone marrow to her. My mother's voice cracked across the living room like a whip. Nicole sat on the couch, pale, tears carefully arranged on her cheeks like she was auditioning for sainthood. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, silent but nodding. Always nodding. She's dying, Mom said. And you're the only match. I looked at them, at the same 3 people who had watched Nicole destroy my career, lie to my boss, sleep with my fiancé, and still had the audacity to call me the selfish one. She's family, Dad finally muttered, like that word was supposed to erase everything she'd done. That's when I smiled. Calm, slow, the kind of smile that made my mother blink. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse. She's not. I pulled out the envelope. Thick, sealed just hours ago. The room shifted. Nicole's hand froze mid-wipe across her cheek. What is that? My mom asked. I opened it, unfolded the paper. Read the line I'd memorized 100 times already. Probability of full sibling relationship, 0%. My voice was steady. I took a DNA test. 2 weeks ago. They all stared. My mom shook her head. That's not possible. Oh, it's possible, I said, holding out the paper. In fact, it's printed right here. Dad's face went pale. My mother's lips parted like she was going to scream, but nothing came out. Nicole? She just stared at me, because for once, her perfect little script had been rewritten, and I was the one holding the pen. My name is Sierra Lane, and from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me, because the moment they told me to save my sister's life was the same moment I realized she was never my sister to begin with. Nicole was always the favorite. Not just a little, not like, oh, she's older, she needs more help kind of favoritism. I mean blinding, suffocating, unspoken but everywhere favoritism. When I got good grades, they smiled. When Nicole passed her driving test on the 3rd try, they threw a backyard barbecue. When I won a scholarship, Dad said, don't brag. It makes your sister feel bad. She was the fragile one, the pretty one, the one Mom called our little star while I stood in the shadows, carrying the weight of being the responsible daughter, the invisible one. But I didn't hate her. I told myself families were messy. That maybe I was just more independent. That love looked different for everyone. I held on to that lie until the day Nicole ruined everything. It started with my engagement. Tyler and I were together for 4 years. Solid. Kind. We had a plan. Save money, move to a new city, start fresh. I told Nicole everything. I confided in her like sisters are supposed to. 2 months before the wedding, he called it off. No explanation. No closure. Just a message that said, I can't do this. I broke. And I still didn't suspect her. Not until I found the messages. Flirty. Cruel. Shameless. From Nicole to Tyler. Weeks worth of texts. Pictures. She'd been seducing him behind my back. And when I showed my parents, Mom shrugged. It's not like you were married. Dad said Tyler made his own choice. But Nicole didn't stop there. A few weeks later, HR at my job called me in. An anonymous tip had been submitted to corporate, suggesting I was leaking client information for money. Fake screenshots. Doctored emails. It almost worked. I only kept my job because my manager knew me well enough to dig deeper. The anonymous account? Linked to Nicole's Wi-Fi network. I brought it up at dinner. My mother said, You're not perfect either, Sierra. That was the night I stopped pretending I had a real sister. I went low contact after that. No family holidays. No calls. No texting birthday wishes to people who would never return the effort. But then the call came. Nicole was sick. Aggressive leukemia. She needed a bone marrow transplant, and I was the only match. Suddenly, I was important again. Suddenly, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. And suddenly, they expected me to forget everything. Forgive everything. But what they didn't know was that I had already started digging. And the truth I uncovered? It made everything make sense. After the diagnosis, the story shifted fast. One moment, I was the forgotten daughter. The next, I was cast as the selfish one refusing to save her poor, helpless sister. The pressure came hard and from every angle. Family friends started messaging me. Old church ladies I barely remembered were calling me heartless. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years left a voicemail crying, "She needs you, Sierra. How can you live with yourself if she dies?" The guilt wasn't subtle. It was relentless. My mother would text every morning like a campaign manager. Nicole's white blood cell count dropped again. The doctors said it has to be you. She's still your sister, Sierra. Still your sister. They kept repeating that like it was scripture, like it canceled out every betrayal, every lie, every scar Nicole had left behind. I started to question myself. Maybe I was being cruel. Maybe I really was cold, like they said. Maybe I was broken from years of swallowing disappointment and just couldn't feel right anymore. I stayed up nights staring at the ceiling, imagining her funeral, the headlines, the whispers, the way they'd paint me as the monster. I even picked up the phone once to call the transplant coordinator, but something stopped me. Not fear, not bitterness, a gut feeling, a voice that said, "Wait, look closer." So I did. I went through the family documents, old medical forms, insurance papers, the bottom drawer in my mom's desk she thought I'd forgotten about. That's where I found it. A sealed manila envelope. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Inside, hospital records, lab work, a copy of my birth certificate, and a note I'd never seen before. A sticky note, faded but clear. "Keep this in case Sierra ever asks." My hands were shaking. I took the documents to a private DNA clinic the next morning. No lawyers, no accusations, just a quiet swab of my cheek and a deep breath. 2 weeks later, I picked up the results in person. I opened them alone in my car, hands cold, heart in my throat. Probability of full sibling relationship, 0%. Shared DNA, negligible. Nicole wasn't my sister, not biologically, not genetically. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why she looked nothing like me. Why our birthdays were barely 6 months apart. Why Dad's name was missing from one of the birth certificates. They'd lied. For years. And let me suffer for a lie I didn't even know I was keeping. But they had no idea I knew. Not yet. And I planned to keep it that way until the perfect moment. Once I had the DNA results, everything inside me went still. Not chaotic. Not angry. Just still. That kind of quiet you only feel when something finally clicks into place. And, deep down you were never crazy. I carried those papers around with me for days. Folded them into my journal. Slept with it on the nightstand. Not because I needed to reread them. I'd memorized every line, but because they made me feel safe. For the first time in my life, I had proof. It wasn't just favoritism. It wasn't just dysfunction. It was deception. I didn't confront them right away. That would have been satisfying, sure. But I wasn't after an explosion. I was after clarity. So I waited. I showed up to family meetings. I answered just enough texts to keep them off balance. I let my mother believe I was thinking it over. The irony? The kinder I became, the more desperate they got. They thought I was softening. Nicole sent a text one night, short, cold. "I know we've had issues, but you can do this one decent thing." She didn't ask. She commanded. That was always her way. Even in childhood, she got what she wanted. She didn't negotiate. She took. And if I didn't give willingly, my parents punished me for making things difficult. 1 week before the family meeting, I booked a quiet appointment with a lawyer. Nothing litigious. Just questions. I wanted to understand how deep their lies went. Birth certificates, guardianship, medical history. He gave me more than I expected. Apparently, Nicole had been adopted privately. Closed paperwork. Paid under the table. Never disclosed. No court file. Just my mother's signature and a buried paper trail. I wasn't shocked, but I was done pretending. So when my parents invited me over, said they were finally ready to talk face to face, I agreed. They wanted control. They wanted to corner me, manipulate me, guilt me into submission in the same living room they'd raised me in like a second-class citizen. Instead, I walked in with my envelope. Calm, clean, intentional. Mom looked relieved. Dad gave a weak smile. Nicole was sitting under a blanket, like some tragic Victorian heroine. "Before we start," I said, "I brought something." Mom raised her eyebrows. Paperwork. I nodded. Proof. I took the envelope out and placed it gently on the table. I want you to read this out loud. She looked confused. Why? Because it's about your daughter, I said, turning to Nicole, and whether or not she ever was mine. That was when the air changed. And for once, I wasn't scared. I wasn't hoping to be loved, forgiven, or heard. I was just done being lied to. And the truth? It was about to speak louder than any apology they never gave. The room went quiet when I placed the envelope on the table. Not the kind of quiet that comes before an argument, the kind that comes before a storm. My mother looked at the envelope like it was something toxic. My father leaned back, arms crossed, his default when he wanted to appear calm while boiling underneath. And Nicole didn't move at all. She just stared at me, jaw tight, eyes hard. There was no fear in her face, just that same smugness. She wore the night she lied to my fiancé, and the day she tried to get me fired. I could see her thinking, you won't go through with this. She still believed she could win. My mother was the first to speak. What is this supposed to be? I stayed seated. My voice didn't rise. It's a DNA test from a certified lab, taken 2 weeks ago. It says that Nicole and I share no biological connection. None. I let the words hang. My mother scoffed. That's ridiculous. You're sisters. No, I said, sliding the paper across the coffee table. You raised us like sisters. You said we were, but you lied. Dad leaned forward, picked up the paper, scanned it, and paled. His hands actually shook. Where did you get this? From your filing cabinet. Bottom drawer. Beneath the tax folders, I said. You left the birth records and medical forms. Sloppily. I turned to my mom. You wanted me to believe I owed her something. You wanted me to feel guilty for walking away. But you lied about who she is. You made me the backup plan for someone who never once treated me like a sister. Nicole shifted in her chair now. Her mouth opened, closed. Then finally she snapped. This doesn't change anything. I am your sister. We grew up together. Yeah, I said. And you slept with my fiancé. Tried to ruin my job. Turned our parents against me. And now you want my body to save yours? I don't owe you that. I'm dying, she said, eyes gleaming. And I'm healing, I said back, steady as stone. Which means I don't set myself on fire just because you're cold. My mother stood up. Sierra, don't do this. Don't throw away your family over paperwork. I looked at her, really looked. This was the woman who let me be bullied at home, who blamed me for being too sensitive, who watched me break and called it drama. And she was still doing it. Still rewriting the truth in real time. You threw me away years ago, I said. You just never thought I'd grow up enough to walk away myself. Dad tried once more. We raised you. Doesn't that mean anything? It does, I said. It means I learned exactly what kind of person I'll never be. I stood, picked up my bag, paused at the door. No one followed. Nicole was crying now. Maybe from fear, maybe from fury, maybe because, for the first time in her life, no one was rushing in to save her. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel guilt, either. Just release. Because the truth wasn't a weapon. It was freedom. And I had waited my entire life to finally hold it in my hands. I didn't go home and cry. I didn't check my phone obsessively or sit by the window like some abandoned child waiting to be chased. I didn't even feel hollow. I felt clean. Like I'd finally shed a skin I'd been suffocating in for years. One made of guilt, gaslighting, and forced sisterhood. The fallout started almost immediately. 2 days later, my aunt called. She said she'd heard some ridiculous rumor about Nicole not being my real sister. That surely I was just lashing out and didn't mean what I said. I let her talk for 3 full minutes. Then I hung up. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I'd spent my whole life giving people access to my pain like it was public property. That ended now. A week after the confrontation, I found out Nicole had been moved to another donor list. No exact matches. The urgency was rising. I still didn't answer her texts. At first, they came every day, long, manipulative monologues about forgiveness, about history, about choosing love over bitterness. Then, when I didn't respond, they changed. You're evil. You want me to die. No wonder no one ever liked you. And then the most honest one. They always picked me. You know why? Because you were too cold to love. I read that one twice. Not because it hurt, but because it was a confession. She knew. She'd always known. And now she was finally admitting it. The power dynamic had flipped, and she hated it. I deleted every message without replying. I knew my parents were scrambling behind the scenes. My cousin told me there had been family meetings full of raised voices and questions like, what else have they lied about? Apparently, a few relatives had started to distance themselves from my parents. They didn't like being dragged into a scandal, especially one they couldn't spin. Good. Let the truth do its job. I didn't gloat. I focused on rebuilding. I signed up for therapy not to fix myself, but to unlearn the survival tactics I'd been forced to adopt in a family that only knew how to use or discard. I got a new job, one where no one knew my story, where I didn't walk into rooms with invisible bruises and a reputation crafted by someone else's jealousy. I even started seeing someone. Slowly, carefully. For the first time, I didn't over-explain my trauma on the first date. I didn't feel the need to justify why I protect my peace like a locked door. He asked questions gently. He waited for real answers. And that made me feel safe in a way biology never had. One evening, while folding laundry, I came across the envelope again, the DNA results. I almost threw them out, but I didn't. I tucked them into a folder marked, not shame, just truth. Because that's what they were now. A fact, not a wound. I realized something that night. The revenge wasn't in the reveal. It wasn't in the silence or the ruined reputations or the way my parents couldn't walk into church without whispers following them down the pews. It was in the healing, in the boundaries I built, the joy I allowed myself, the fact that I didn't feel the need to explain anything to anyone anymore. Nicole had once destroyed my relationship, my career, my name, and she did it with a smirk, knowing my parents would protect her. And they had, until I protected myself. And now, they had to live with the truth, not because I shouted it from rooftops, but because I refused to carry their silence any longer. 3 months later, I moved. A small apartment in a quiet city where no one knew my name unless I wanted them to. No old neighbors. No family friends who didn't want to pick sides. No well-meaning coworkers asking, "How's your sister doing?" Just space. The first night I slept there, I left the window open. No traffic. No yelling from the apartment downstairs. Just crickets and my own heartbeat. I stood in the center of the room and whispered out loud, "You're safe now." Not for anyone else to hear. Just me. Because for so long I didn't feel safe. Not in my own home. Not even in my own skin. I had been raised in a family that weaponized love, turned it into a transaction. If I was useful, I got to stay. If I stepped out of line, even once, I became the villain. And for a while, I believed them. Believed I was cold, bitter, selfish. But now I understood what they called selfish was just me learning to say no. I set boundaries like concrete walls. No calls. No visits. I changed my number. Blocked every one of them. And I didn't second guess it. Some nights were quiet. A little too quiet. I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder, did I go too far? Should I have explained more? But then I'd remember the restaurant meeting, the way my mother's face twisted when I read the DNA test, the look of disbelief, not because it couldn't be true, but because I dared to say it out loud. I stopped asking myself if I was harsh, and started asking why they never thought they were. I made new friends, carefully, slowly, people who didn't need my suffering to feel strong. People who asked how my day was and didn't expect me to earn kindness in return. One of them, Talia, was the first person I ever told the whole story to without minimizing it. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it. She just said, "That must have been so lonely. I'm really glad you got out." And I cried, harder than I did when Tyler left, harder than when I opened the test results, because someone saw me and didn't use it as leverage. I celebrated my birthday alone that year. Dinner at a cafe. A small cake with a single candle. No photos. No fake smiles. Just peace. I made a wish. But it wasn't for love or approval or closure. It was just this. May I never again doubt what I know is true. Because the greatest gift I'd ever given myself was walking away before they could take anything else. A year after the DNA test, I sat at the edge of a lake just outside the city. No noise, no expectations, just the wind brushing over the surface like a secret it promised not to tell. I'd brought one thing with me, a letter, not to mail, just to write. It had taken me months to start. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I needed to wait until I could write it without shaking. It started simply, to the people who said I owed them everything, this is what I owed myself. I didn't list every betrayal, every silence, every time they watched Nicole take while I bled to keep the family image polished. I didn't mention the night my mother stood between us like a judge and told me, she's still your sister, whether you like it or not. Instead, I wrote about who I'd become. A woman who sleeps through the night, who laughs without checking who's watching, who doesn't walk into rooms with her hands half raised, ready to defend her existence. I wrote about the quiet joy of cooking for myself, of friends who refill your water without being asked, of waking up and realizing no one is waiting to twist your kindness into obligation. The letter ended with this. Asterisk, you taught me that blood means loyalty, but you only bled me dry. I'm done donating parts of myself just to be tolerated. You raised me to believe I had to earn love, but I've learned peace doesn't need proof. Asterisk, I folded the paper, tore it slowly, not out of rage, but ritual. I let the pieces scatter into the water like ash. And for once, I didn't imagine who might come running after me. No fantasy where they read it and weep. No desperate apology or family reckoning. Just the clean, unremarkable freedom of letting it go. Later that night, I lit a candle in my apartment. No one sent me gifts. No one said my name like it tasted like resentment. And I was okay with that, because I stopped confusing absence with abandonment. Sometimes absence is healing. Sometimes it's the boundary your soul begged you to draw years ago. I looked around the space I'd built. Nothing extravagant, just mine. On the wall was a framed print I bought for myself a few months back. For words. Peace over permission. Always. That's what this entire journey had been about. Not revenge. Not punishment. Release. They tried to guilt me with the word family. But what is family if it only shows up with conditions? What is family if it destroys you, then expects you to save the pieces? I still don't know who Nicole really is. I don't know why my parents lied, or what they thought they were protecting. But I know this. Love doesn't manipulate, and DNA doesn't entitle. They told me I was heartless, but I was never heartless. I just finally stopped giving mine to people who only came with knives. So no, I didn't save Nicole's life, but I saved my own, and that was enough.